Hey everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be recommending you some of my favorite fall reads. I've been wanting to make a fall recommendations video for years now, and I always plan it out, write out the books that I want to recommend, and then for some reason I just never get around to filming it. But this year I've decided it is the year that I'm going to be filming and uploading this video and sharing all of my favorite spooky fall reads with you guys. I'm so excited to talk about these books. Fall is just truly my favorite time of the year, my favorite time for reading especially. So let's just get started. So I split the books into different categories. So we're going to start off with the romance books. So the first two are the X-Hex and the Kiss Curse, both by Erin Sterling. I feel like these come as no surprise as being some of my favorite spooky Halloween-y fall reads. These are the first two books in a spooky witchy romance series. The third book is actually coming out really soon. It's been pushed back forever, so I'm really excited about that one. But these books are just so perfect for this time of year. I initially read the X-Hex on Halloween, and that was just like the most magical experience. So if you've never read the X-Hex, or maybe you have read it but you haven't read it on Halloween, then I highly recommend just curling up with some hot cocoa and a blanket and a spooky ambiance on in the background and reading this book, because the vibes are immaculate. Same with this one, they're also immaculate, but there's something so special about this one. It's my favorite of the two. Basically, these books take place in this small town that is kind of reminiscent, honestly, of Stars Hollow, but make it a little bit witchy, a little bit magical. And I'm not going to tell you what this one's about because it's the second book in the series. All the books in the series connect to each other, but I'll tell you about the first book. So in the X-Hex, we follow our main character, Vivi, and when she was 19, her heart was broken by Reese when she finds out that he is engaged to another woman, or set to be engaged to another woman. It's like an arranged marriage situation. And in her heartbreak, her and her cousin Gwen, who is the main character of this one, they decide to fool around and put a silly little hex on him, a silly little curse. They don't think anything of it. Years and years go by, and that brings us to the present day of this novel, where Reese has to come back to this town as a founding family member to charge the ley lines, and weird things start happening to him. And Vivi soon finds out that this silly little curse that she put on Reese is actually real and very, very serious, so they have to work together to kind of overcome this curse that she's put on him, and they end up reconnecting, and it's really, really beautiful. These books are just so magical, so fun. They're very quick reads, and honestly, they're just a silly, goofy time. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to say that I would love adaptations of these books, like silly, little, charming Halloween movies. I need more Halloween romance movies, okay? Why don't we have more of them? We have like a plethora of Christmas ones. Where are the Halloween ones? These would be perfect. But I digress. These books are amazing. I'm so excited for the third one, but I would definitely recommend these ones for the fall season, but specifically on Halloween. Like, read it within a day or two of Halloween. It is so good. The next book is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. I adore Ashley Poston. I feel like we all know this. I love her YA books, which I feel like nobody talks about anymore, and that's so sad. But I also love the recent adult romances that she has been publishing, and this was her debut one. This book is perfect for the fall and for the spooky time. So this book basically follows our main character, Florence, and she is a ghostwriter, and she is currently having some difficulty finishing the romance book that she is ghostwriting because she no longer believes in love. So she goes to her new editor, asks for an extension, but he says no. And then she finds out that her dad has passed away, so trigger warnings, by the way, for death of a parent. It does get quite sad. And so she has to go back home to deal with her father's funeral arrangements, and her family just so happens to live in a funeral parlor. They run a funeral parlor, and that's where they live. But when she's at her family's funeral parlor, her editor shows up, but he is a ghost, and Florence has to kind of work with her editor to figure out what happened to him because he doesn't remember dying. I just love the vibe of the ghost writer and ghost editor romance vibe. It's so fun, but it's also obviously offset with the terrible heartbreak and sadness of Florence's dad dying. But just the overall vibes of this book, the writing, everything about about it is just perfect for this time of year. It's just absolutely one of my favorites, and I feel like I'm in need of a reread. I don't know if I'll reread it this year, but it's definitely something that I would like to do in the future. And then we have another book in the same vein as The Ex-Hex, and that is Small Town Big Magic by Hazel Beck. This also obviously takes place in a small town that I would also say is kind of reminiscent of Stars Hollow, Gilmore Girls. I feel like any small town people are just gonna compare to Stars Hollow. It is what it is. But this book is so fun because we follow our main character Emerson, and I believe she works in a bookstore. She owns a bookstore, and she has no idea that she is a witch. All of her memories have been wiped of her being a witch, but then one day something happens and her memories start to come back to her of her time as a witch before her memory was wiped. All of her friends are witches. They all knew she was a witch, so there's like some tension and some things going on there. Also, just look at this cover. This cover just screams fall, screams spooky. I'm obsessed with it. This is also the first book in a series, another companion type series. I have not yet read the sequel. I believe there's a third book coming out as well, but this book was just a lot of fun. The romance in it was also just so beautiful, and it's definitely my favorite part of this book overall. So it's like a friends to lovers romance, but there's also like something happened between them in high school, and if I remember correctly, Emerson doesn't fully remember what happened, like what this shift was in their relationship, why they've never like taken the next step. And as her memory starts to come back to her and as she connects with, what's his name, Jacob, and he's also grumpy, so it's kind of like Grumpy Sunshine. We love that trope. It just has so many fun vibes in it, and like I said, just perfect for this time of year. So the next two romance books I don't actually own copies of, but the first one is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. This is a book that I read last year with my book club Besties and Books, and I loved it so much. It's got witches, it's got the cozy vibes, a little bit of found family, there's a hot grumpy librarian, like all of the good vibes are there. The writing is good. It's just like the perfect recipe for a fall book. So in this world, witches are not allowed to like talk about being a witch. They're also not allowed to be like around other witches very often, because then it just kind of draws attention to them, I believe. So our main character, I don't remember her name, has kind of been secluded her entire life. She has no real roots, no real connections with anybody, and then one day she receives a message inviting her to this house to train these young witches, and she is just completely fascinated by this because witches are not supposed to be together, and here are these like 3 or 4 children who are together. And so she goes to this house to help train these witches, even though she's technically not supposed to, and she like finds a little family there, and it's just so cute. So many things happen in that book, and I love it so much, and I'm definitely due for a reread. It's also the first in a series. The second book keeps getting pushed off. It was supposed to come out last year, I think, and it got pushed to this year, and now it's been pushed to next year, so I'm really sad about that. But this first book is just so much fun, and I will definitely be rereading it closer to when the second book comes out, but I highly recommend it if you're looking for another witchy spooky book. And then the last book for the romance category is Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match by Sally Thorne. This book has such an interesting and fun concept. So we're basically following Frankenstein's sister Angelica. So this entire book takes place during the plot and the story of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. So it's like happening alongside the story and the events from that book. But we follow Frankenstein's sister Angelica, and she is always helping Victor Frankenstein with his creations, and she decides to go about making her perfect match. So I think she does it behind his back. I could be wrong. I think I'm wrong actually. And obviously all these issues arise when he like comes alive. He wants to know who he was before, where he came from, what his story is, all while also falling in love with Angelica. It's a really interesting story. This book was a lot of fun. I need to get a copy of it at some point because I really enjoyed it and would love to do a reread of it. But this was such a fun book to read in the fall, like Halloween time. I did it a couple years ago. It was perfect. The vibes immaculate. I highly recommend this book. So now I have a couple of fantasy books. I feel like honestly most fantasies are appropriate for the fall season, but I do just have a few that I wanted to highlight in this video. The first one is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is not going to be the only V.E. Schwab book that you see pop up on this list. There is actually an absurd amount of V.E. Schwab in this list. You're just gonna have to deal with it. Her books are just fall. They just are, okay? They define fall for me. But we have this series, the Shades of Magic series, and it is just such an immersive fantasy, and the writing is so beautiful, so lush, so descriptive, that it just really like captures you and brings you in to everything that's going on, and it just feels perfect for fall. Like, I imagine reading this on like a rainy day, curled up in a blanket, and just getting lost in this world for hours, like on a day where you don't have to do anything and you can just sit and like just read, you know? Like, that's the perfect vibe for this book. But basically this series, we are in a world where there are 4 alternate Londons. We have grey London, white London, black London, and red London, and the only people who can actually travel between these Londons are called Antares. So one of our main characters, Kel, is an Antari, and he can travel between the Londons, and it's kind of part of his job to deliver messages between the different kings. But then we also have Holland, who has a bit more of an antagonistic energy about him, but he's also an Antari, and they're like the only 2 that people know of. So we have 3 books in the main trilogy, and then she's recently continued it with 3 more books. We have the first one out, it's The Fragile Threads of Power, which was also really good. The characters are just so fun, the world is so vast and beautiful and immersive. I love the characters to pieces, so I feel like if you're just looking to get fully lost in a fantasy world, this is the series to do that with, because there are 4 books out in this world. It's beautiful, and I highly recommend it. So the next book I actually have not talked about on my channel at all since I read it, and that's because there was the St. Martin Press boycott going on, which included the imprint Wednesday Books, which is who this book is published with. But recently the boycott did come to an end. If I can find the information about the boycott ending, I will link it down below for you guys to check out and inform yourselves on the situation. But Readers for Accountability has called for the end of the boycott, so I can finally talk about St. Martin's Press books, and I'm really excited about that. Really happy that they were able to come to an agreement, because I've been dying to talk about this book, and that is none other than the Divine Rivals duology by Rebecca Ross. This series has blown up, and despite the boycott, people were still talking about it. Hopefully they just didn't know about the boycott, but it's been all over TikTok, all over YouTube. But the Divine Rivals duology, oh my goodness, I loved these books so much, and I need to get my hands on copies of them because I just loved them so much. Like, this is when I was trying to get back into my fantasy era near the beginning of the year. Like, I think I read this book in January or February, and then read the sequel the second I got the Holden from the library. They were such quick reads. Oh my goodness. Like, I so desperately wish you guys that I could have talked to you about these books right after I read them, because I do feel a little fuzzy on them now. But my goodness, like, absolutely some of my favorite books of the year. Basically, it's a rivals to lovers fantasy duology. There's a big war going on, and our main character Iris's brother went off to the war, and she's been sending him letters via this typewriter that I believe her grandmother left to her. I feel like she either doesn't get any answers, and then she does and realizes that it's not her brother. I don't know, things happen with the whole letter thing. And she has a workplace rival named Roman, and basically he's been receiving the letters that Iris has been sending her brother, and they start this pen pal situation. But Iris does not know that she's talking to Roman, but Roman knows that he's talking to Iris. So the series is just, oh my god, it's so, like, I don't even know how to describe it. It is so immersive. I read them so quickly, could not put them down. I was really worried because they are so hyped up here on BookTube and on Book Talk, and I'm kind of hesitant of books like that are so new and just kind of come out of nowhere and blow up. But I'm so happy I picked these books up, and I'm not gonna lie, the magical typewriter like plot line is kind of what brought me into the books. I'm a sucker for a typewriter. I loved the characters, I loved the romance, oh my god. And the second book I feel like people don't love as much as the first one, but I loved it so much. Like, I'm so conflicted on which book I like better because I just love them so much. Like, I cried, all the emotions. I need to reread them, and I've only read them this year, so wild. I'm so happy I can finally talk about them. So if you've not read them yet, what have you been doing? You should read them. They are just, oh, like literally some of my favorite fantasy books ever now. Like, top tier. You'll definitely be hearing me talk about them more as the year goes on now that I can. The last fantasy book though that I would like to highlight is This Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings. Yes. So this is a newer release. It just came out at the beginning of August. It's also an instant New York Times bestseller. I'm so happy for Haley. If you don't know, Haley is a booktuber on here. She does not really post all that often, but she's Pages of Haley. Love her. We've been friends for so long and I'm just so proud of her. But this book, perfect for the fall, okay? It's about black vampires, and vampires to me just equal fall. Okay, equal the spooky time, equals this time of the year. I did read this back in the end of July, very beginning of August before it came out, so I wish I read it in the fall. I do want to reread it at some point, but I'm thinking I'll probably wait till closer to the sequel's release for that. But I loved this book so much. Yes, black vampires, sapphic relationship. It's childhood best friends to enemies to lovers. It's beautiful. I don't know how to describe the plot of this book. It takes place during the Harlem Renaissance. But yeah, it says a wave of mysterious killings shocks the city, forcing Elise and Layla to work together to find out if some Reapers are turning human again or becoming even deadlier. It's just so good. So like these childhood best friends turn enemies have to work together to try and figure out what's going on with this string of really violent murders. It was just a lot of fun. Haley's writing is so beautiful. So if you guys have not read this book yet, I highly recommend it. It is still a fairly new release, but you should definitely check it out. I'm obsessed with it and I cannot wait for book 2. So now I would love to get into some of the mystery thriller books, which I just think is one of the most perfect genres for this time of the year. Most of these I do not have copies with me. I do own all of them, I just don't have them with me now. They're in storage. So the first one is the Truly Devious series by Maureen Johnson. This is a series that I started reading in my very first start of fall reading vlog that I did a couple of years ago, and it just oh my god, it took over my entire life. I loved it so much. So it's basically following our main character Stevie, and she gets accepted into this boarding school that kind of specializes in different talents. So everybody goes there with the intention of studying their talent or doing a project relating to their talent. So she goes there with the intent of solving this mystery at the academy that has been unsolved for the last however many years, I can't remember how many. And so it's kind of told in a dual timeline. So it's told in the present with Stevie trying to solve this case, but we also get flashbacks from when the murders were actually happening. It's beautiful. Okay, we're at a boarding school. Okay, it takes place during the fall, beginning of the school year. The vibes are immaculate. The characters are so good. The mystery is so interesting. The first 3 books follow the same mystery of what happened at Ellingham Academy, but then we have some standalone mystery books within the series. But yeah, if you want to see me reading this in my fall vlog, I'll make sure to link it down below and up above in the cards, because it was just the perfect book to read to get me into the fall spirit. So if you're looking for that kind of read, looking for a book that just really captures the fall aesthetics and the fall vibes, I definitely recommend this series. The next one is one of my favorite books of this year, and it is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. This is her newest release, and a lot of people are saying it is her best book yet, and I think I agree. I don't know, I really love the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and obviously you have 3 books in that world with those characters to fall in love with, so you spend more time with them. But there was something about this book that was just so special. It was so captivating. I read this on vacation and I was reading it on the beach of all places, which just feels like a very weird setting to be reading a book like this. And it just, oh my god, I could not put this book down. Literally was itching to read the book when I wasn't reading it. I loved it so much. So in this book we are following Belle, and her mother Rachel Price disappeared when she was only 2 years old, and to this day it's still an unsolved case. Nobody knows what happened to Rachel Price. Nobody knows if she ran away, if she was kidnapped and murdered, if she's alive. Nobody knows anything, and there's all these theories and everyone wants to know what happened to Rachel Price, but nobody knows. The only person who was there during her disappearance was Belle, but she was 2 years old, so she doesn't remember anything, obviously. In this book there is a documentary being made about the disappearance of Rachel Price. So Belle and her family and, people in the community are taking part in this documentary talking about her disappearance, when all of a sudden Rachel Price reappears and she can't seem to fully remember what happened to her. So the documentary then changes to the reappearance of Rachel Price, and it kind of deals with Belle trying to come to terms now with her mother coming back, a mother that she doesn't really know or remember, and it's kind of shaken up her life and her world. She's used to just being with her dad, and she knows that like she should be excited that her mom is back, but she doesn't know this person. And so the whole book they're just trying to figure out what happened to Rachel Price, trying to get her to remember, while Belle's also trying to like connect with her mom and like try to trust her and, you know, form some sort of connection with her. So good. Like the twists and turns in this book I couldn't have predicted. My jaw was just constantly on the ground while reading this book. If anybody was paying attention to me while I was reading on the beach, they would have been like, what is this girl reading? Because I probably looked a little bit insane. I cannot say enough nice things about this book. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year, and if you're looking for a good mystery thriller, I definitely 100% recommend this one. The next book I want to talk about is Sadie by Courtney Summers. I feel like this book really had its moment on booktube years ago, like when it came out, and nobody really talks about it anymore. I don't even know the last time I heard somebody talk about this book, but it is so good. Like I feel like if you like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder and you like the podcast element in that, and you like the audiobooks for it, especially where it's kind of like a full cast, like really good production, then I highly recommend Sadie. Like I think you would really love it. They're very kind of similar in the way that they are formatted and like put together. So Sadie is basically, again, like a dual timeline kind of book. So we're following Sadie, whose sister has disappeared. Nobody knows what happened to her, and I believe nobody's really looking for her anymore. And so Sadie kind of goes on this quest to find her sister, figure out what happened, because she feels that she knows who did it, like who took her sister, who potentially probably killed her sister. So she's on a mission to find out what happened. And then we also follow kind of the present day timeline, where this guy, can't remember his name, he has a podcast about Sadie and about her own disappearance, and so he's kind of like interviewing people, trying to piece together the story of what happened to Sadie. It is such a captivating read. Again, I highly recommend the audiobook specifically for this one because of the whole podcast element. So like when he's, you know, recording the podcast, like it sounds like you're listening to a podcast. When he's interviewing people, there's different voices for the people that he's interviewing, and there's different sounds to like make it sound like, you know, it's actually being recorded on a phone or like on a recording device. It's so good. So the audiobook is just a really immersive experience that I highly recommend. So the next category is just simply called vibes, because I know that they give me the fall vibes. I just can't particularly like maybe articulate why, or they just don't necessarily fit into another category that I have listed. So this is just vibes. So the first one is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I can barely even like describe what this book is about, and I feel like this is like a common thing that everybody experiences when they try to talk about this series. But we follow our main character, Blue, and she lives in a family of psychics, and her entire life she's been told that she is going to kill her true love by kissing him. Like when she kisses her true love, he's gonna die. So she's kind of just avoided boys her whole life, avoided kissing her entire life in fear that she is going to kill somebody when she kisses them. But she ends up meeting this group of boys, the Raven Boys. She ends up befriending them, and like Gansey is on the hunt for this like Welsh prince, Glendower, and so the book's kind of about that. There's a whole bunch of things going on. I literally never know how to describe this series, but the vibes are immaculate. They just kind of feel like the perfect like rainy day kind of books. There's a lot of nature, and the writing is really beautiful, and also it's just kind of like a comfort series for me, and fall equals comfort. So if you have not yet read these books, please look up a better description than what I've just told you, but they are so good. And the last one for the vibes category is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, one of my absolute favorite books of all time. So this book follows our main character, Addie LaRue, and she makes a deal with the devil to live forever, but he curses her to be forgotten by everyone she meets. And so she kind of lives her life for, I believe, centuries without being remembered by anybody. The second that their eyes leave her, like they don't remember her, until one day somebody does remember her, and she's trying to figure out why that is, and she's trying to like hold on to it because it feels like it can slip away at any moment. Like I said, V.E. Schwab just is fall to me. Her books just are the definition of fall. But this book in particular has a bookshop that I really love, and books and bookshops really give me the fall vibes. And honestly, this is just like the perfect, again, cozy rainy day kind of read. I highly recommend this one. Just know that it's like not like an expansive fantasy book or anything. It's very like low-key, slow, character driven, so don't expect some like really epic story in terms of like fighting and dragons and like things like that. Like, it's a very like intimate, personal story, and I'm obsessed with it. Okay, so now it's time for the final category of the video, which are the spooky Halloween books. So first up, we have one of my absolute favorites, The Library of Shadows by Rachel Moore. This book, oh my goodness, it's the perfect spooky Halloweeny read. It takes place at this elite boarding school. Our main character, Esty, goes to this boarding school because her dad used to go there. Her dad is now dead, so she goes there to kind of be connected to him in a way, but she encounters a mischievous ghost named Mateo, and he gets her into a little bit of trouble. It's kind of goofy at times, but it's also just like a lot of fun, and the writing is beautiful, and the descriptions in this book are so atmospheric and gorgeous and just really paint that like fall picture. Like, just imagine a boarding school in the fall, crunchy leaves, like all the descriptions are in this book. I literally had to create a tab when I was annotating it specifically for these kinds of descriptions because they were just so breathtaking. So if you're looking for like the perfect autumnal spooky read with some creepy ghosts but also some fun ghosts, mainly set in a school library, then you need to pick up this book. It is so much fun. I just adore it with every fiber of my being. The next book is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. I've surprisingly only read this book once. I need to do a reread because honestly my memory is really fuzzy on this one, but I know there's a sequel coming out, so I've kind of been holding off on a reread until the sequel comes out, but I don't even know when that's happening. It might be next year, it might not be. I genuinely don't know. But this book follows our protagonist, Yadriel, and the top of it says Yadriel has summoned a ghost and now he can't get rid of him. But basically Yadriel is a trans boy, and his very traditional family is having some difficulty accepting his gender, so he kind of goes on this mission to prove himself as a real brujo. And it's just like a beautiful book. It's got spooky vibes. They literally, I believe, live in a cemetery. They like take care of the cemetery. There's a ghost, romance with the ghost. There's also romance with a ghost in this one. We just love ghost romances, I guess. And like, honestly, what could have better fall spooky vibes than a book taking place in a cemetery? You guys have to pick this book up if you haven't yet already. It's one of my favorites. The next one is another series, and I don't own any of them, sadly. I read them from the library last year. I will be trying to get my hands on copies very soon, but that is the Lockwood & Co. series by Jonathan Stroud. Oh my goodness. So this book series, it's a 5-book series, was turned into a Netflix adaptation show last year. We only got 1 season and then it was cancelled. Story of all of our lives. But the show spans the first 2 books in the series, so if you ever watched that show and didn't know they were books, they are, and you can read them. There's three more books that were not told in the show, so you can get all brand new information. It's beautiful. It's a really fun middle grade series, spooky. It basically takes place in like London in the future though, and basically ghosts have kind of overtaken London, and the only people who can like see them are like kids. So like once you grow up and turn into adult, you can no longer like see them, so you're kind of really defenseless against them. So there's like a curfew set, and all of the kids basically like work at different ghost hunting agencies to eradicate this like ghost problem. It is so much fun. The crazy like scenarios that they get themselves into and the jobs that they have to take, it's just so much fun. The next one is another middle grade, and we have a couple more middle grades coming up. They're just perfect for this time of the year. But we have City of Ghosts by V.E. Schwab. This is the first book in the Cassidy Blake series. It's her middle grade series where our main character's parents are like ghost hunters. I believe they have all these like published books about ghost hunting, and then they get the opportunity to film a show about ghost hunting, and it takes them to all these different places in the world. This one takes place in Scotland, but we also go to Paris, and I don't remember where the other one goes. But these books are like spooky and they're fun. Our main character also has a ghost best friend, which we just adore. And like V.E. Schwab's writing, just like the way that she writes for a middle grade audience is so fun, and like her writing is just my favorite across all age categories. Like she's so talented. I may as well get the next V.E. Schwab book out of the way. Honestly, like I said, all of her books are so appropriate for the fall spooky season. So even though I'm not mentioning all of them, I'm mentioning a lot of them, but I'm not mentioning all of them. I would recommend all of them for the fall season. But my favorite, my absolute favorite, is The Dark Vault, which is a bind up of the Archived and the Unbound. This series is one of my just all-time favorites. We basically follow our main character Mackenzie, and her family, after the death of her little brother, move into this like hotel turned into like apartment building called the Coronado. So in this world there's a place called the Archived, and it's where the dead lay on shelves like books, and sometimes they get out, and so they have these things called keepers who, you know, go around collecting the escaped histories is what they call them. And then while she's at the Coronado, she meets another keeper. She's never met another one besides her grandfather, who passed the job down to her. This was a really bad description, but I love this series so much. I love Mackenzie and Wesley. He's the other keeper. I adore them so much. The first book takes place during the summer, but it still gives fall vibes, just like in the subject matter of everything going on. The second book does take place in the fall at the beginning of the school year. It's just very eerie. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of creepy. So if you have not read it, I highly recommend it, especially if you love her other books and you haven't ventured into her backlist very much. And then we have some more middle grades that I would like to talk about and end out this video with. So first we have The Glass Witch and The Odds, both by Lindsay Puckett. So we have The Glass Witch, which is absolutely perfect 100% for Halloween. Like read this on Halloween if you can, because it takes place on Halloween. So this book is basically comped as like Hocus Pocus meets Dumplin', but I always love to throw in Halloween Town as well, just because like there's a whole part where they're like collecting items for like a spell or something, and it just totally gives vibes of the first Halloween Town movie. There's also a Halloween pageant, which is kind of where the Dumplin' vibes come in, and the Hocus Pocus, where it takes place over one day on Halloween. It is just a beautiful, perfect book. I love it so much. And then we have The Odds, which is her sophomore novel. This book is so kooky and it's so fun and silly, and I just love it to pieces. I think I love it even more than The Glass Witch. I don't even know why. I just love it so much. We're set in this like nursing home where our main character Begonia lives. Basically they're like these magical powers called the oddities, and if you don't get your oddity, I believe by like your 13th birthday, then like she has to be sent away from the nursing home. So she's kind of freaking out because she doesn't yet have her oddity, so she kind of goes on this like hunt to find her oddity. And there's also like the risk of the nursing home being like shut down, I think. Lots of stuff going on, and this book, oh my god, it was kind of emotional, really spooky, and a lot of fun, and like plot twist at the end. Absolutely crazy. I just adore these books so much, and I highly recommend that you guys read them. Her books deserve so much love, like all of the love, and I'm gonna be pushing these books to you guys all the time, but please read them. They're so good. There are so many more books that I could have recommended, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's one that I've been wanting to make for a very long time. But give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. Comment down below and let me know some of your favorite fall spooky books. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about today, or if you're planning on reading any of them based on my recommendation. I'd really love to know. Subscribe if you've not yet already, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!